Welcome everybody to this afternoon's session on managing change on a capital programme. My name is Iain Cameron. I'm a director of a small business called Logical. What we do is we help govern and control capital programmes, or any programme effectively, but our aim is to provide you with project and programme intelligence so that the next project and programme can be planned and executed better than the last one. I've had the good fortune actually to work for a couple of contractors, a client, a consultancy, and even a software vendor in my career so far. So it's given me multiple perspectives on programs and projects, and it really is my fascination to integrate all of those and inspire people as to why controls is really, really important. So just join me for the next 30 minutes or so, 35 minutes on managing change. If we can, save the questions till the end. There's a roving mic as well, so if you can wait till the mic gets to you before you raise a question. If there's anything I can't answer or we don't have time, please come and see me on the stand. We're at stand 17. It'd be lovely to have a chat with any of you, share some war stories, either till the end of the day or over a coffee or a beer. You're all very welcome. Not even about change, about anything. So, let's get going. I just want to talk to you a little bit about the context of change, because actually when you're managing change on a project or a program, it's really, really important to consider other things. And any of you, and I don't know if there are any of you, but any of you who worked for Westinghouse, which is now Siemens, in the early 2000s will have seen this. I want to speak to you about change in the context of, first of all, needs, right? Why do we even need to bother to manage change? Might seem obvious, but it's the needs that actually then dictate what organisation you need around you to help manage change. We find that we need a strategy for managing change, or we'll very quickly disappear up a spiral of continuing refinement that gets nowhere. And that leads us on to control. How do we actually control our change within the strategy? And what are the opportunities? And by opportunities, actually, I mean positive opportunities, maybe opportunities that are on the other side of positive, and risks. Well, if we've got all this set up, what could possibly go wrong? So just think about that little acronym there, no score. And actually what I'll try and do is bring out lots of other aspects of project management and program controls as well, so you can see the context of all of this. So let's meet some people first. What I want you to do first is meet your client. Every program has a client. This is Andrew. Andrew's CEO, and he has a business that needs capital investment. And it needs capital investment because he needs to deliver stuff for his customers. Now, it doesn't matter whether you're working for a contractor, a subcontractor, or the client organization yourself. Somewhere there will be a client. The interesting thing about Andrew is that he actually responds to his needs and how he's measured. And Andrew's performance is actually measured on the benefits he brings to his customers. So Andrew has kind of a rough idea of the benefits he needs to deliver for his customers, because it depends what industry he's in, but his regulator might tell him, or his customers might tell him, or his marketing team might tell him. And it doesn't matter whether you're in rail, whether you're in airports, whether you're in highways, whether you're in power generation, transmission, any of those things, all of those organizations need capital investment to deliver stuff for their customers. So somehow he has an idea. He has an idea of what he has to do. And generally what will happen in a major program where organizations are making capital investment, they'll set up sponsor teams. And the sponsor teams are generally designed to try and establish what these initial requirements are to deliver benefits. So for example, on rail, you might be looking to have more reliable passenger journeys, more frequent journeys, faster journeys. Just an example. It's not hard to think of other examples, whatever industry you're in. So Andrew is in the enviable position of actually having some initial requirements set up to deliver some benefits. And now his sponsor team need to know some options, okay? They need to know what these benefits are going to be. So there's going to be some sort of discounted cash flow analysis, because maybe these benefits don't appear for 10, 12 years down the line. So they've got to think about the cost of financing. What benefits will each of these options bring? When can each of them be delivered? what investment is needed for each of these options before those benefits actually accrue. Andrew and his board say, right, we've got some idea here, we've got some initial requirements, we're going to approve some initial funding to set up a program team, okay? And the program team is going to work up some options. This is a major investment, it's going to affect a number of things across our organisation. So great, we now have a program team. Fabulous. What I'd like you to do now is meet your program director, Beth. So Beth has got the task of turning Andrew's requirements into some sort of scope, some sort of time, and some sort of cost. And if the program actually gets funding, you know, she and her team have to actually manage delivery. So at the moment, her program's pretty much finalised an option with a sponsor. There's a business case, funding's nearly there. She's even got a performance measurement baseline for the preferred option. Fantastic. Performance measurement baseline. She's got requirements, she's got scope, she's got schedule and a cost, and they're all linked by a common work breakdown structure, aren't they? Yes. Really important that they are, because at the moment her program hasn't got funding. She can't deliver a bean until she's got funding. And now another player enters the scene. Meet Janet. Janet's your FD. And Janet's job is to make sure that Andrew's organisation does not commit to spending money it doesn't have, and actually to make sure that any investment that is made is worthwhile. And Janet's picky. And what's more, there are a lot of projects and programmes competing for resources in this organisation, so Janet actually knows she can't deliver funding for everything Andrew wants. I mean, Andrew's bonus would be sky high if he delivered all these benefits, but Janet knows they can't afford it. So actually what she has to do is she has to justify to Andrew what investment the organisation can make. And of course Andrew's bonus is affected if he doesn't make performance targets, but he also knows if his organisation goes bust, he basically is out of a job. So he does listen to Janet. And Janet's pretty influential. So between the three of them, these three key players have to make commitments on a programme, and it's the commitments where change can start to come in. Typically, organisations will plan investment over a planning horizon. It might be 5 years, might be 10 years, but some programmes will take much longer than that to deliver benefits. So Janet's actually told Andrew that this programme may not be affordable. Andrew, we haven't got enough cash over the next 5 years to actually deliver this programme with the baseline that Beth has currently set up. There you go, pounds, 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 pounds. All the FDs think about. So Andrew is understandably frustrated, but he needs some answers fast, okay? He's got to tell his stakeholders, his shareholders, his customers, the public, when he's going to deliver these benefits and when they can expect more planes, where they can expect the third runway, when they can expect their electricity bills to fall. He's understandably frustrated. So what Andrew needs to do is he needs to consider some changes to this baseline. Some changes that might allow him to deliver at least some of those benefits, but at a lower cost. Maybe not even a lower overall cost, final cost, but maybe just a lower cost in these 5 to 10 years. And Janet, being really picky, actually needs to see the year-on-year, the time-phased effect of each potential change to those requirements. Because it might be that actually the organisation can get away with just making some of the changes and delivering more benefits. And also, she knows that the customers are only going to provide so much funding in each year. So it's not just the final cost we're talking about here on major programmes, it is very, very much about what the cost is, period on period. So Beth needs her delivery team to sign on to some potential changes to the baseline and evaluate them. And she needs a controls organisation to help her. Leave it to us, she says, to Andrew and Janet. So let's meet the controls team. Being a change managing topic, I'd like you to meet Charles. So Charles is the change manager on this program, and he knows full well that every change has to have a scope, time, and a cost and a schedule evaluation. And he knows full well that he has to coordinate all of that and effectively tell Beth the effect of each of the change, so that Janet, the financial director, can be assured that the program is affordable. He's got quite a job, actually, because he can't do that by himself. So let's meet Devinder. So Devinder's role, he works with the delivery teams effectively to look at the schedule effect of any change. Simply, we normally call him the planner, but he really knows how important it is to use the work breakdown structure, code the schedule carefully, to make sure that each activity is placed in the right planning package or control package. With Emma. Emma's going to coordinate tracking all the risks and opportunities to the plan spend profile, because nothing ever goes to plan. That's the one thing and one irony of life that we can depend on, that the only thing that's constant is change, and stuff happens. So Emma's going to work with all the delivery teams to surface these risks, and as long as the risks are properly understood and quantified to some extent, the program will get funding for them, and the program can actually deliver within a funding limit that allows some money for risks. And then we've got Faisal. Faisal knows masses about data. He is ace, right? Faisal makes sure all the reporting sources are there, they're complete, they're accurate. He's really good at interpreting the data. He's really good at helping the delivery teams and the program director understand where the project is. He's pulling a lot of things together. He's often working with multiple systems, or he's often coordinating the use of an integrated system with other people. But he knows a lot about data, and his main wish is that work breakdown structure that pulls together requirements, cost, and time is maintained. So we call him the reporting manager. But there are some other really important players. So on any program, beneath a program director, you'll normally have delivery managers looking at elements of a sub-program. So here's Ingrid. She's one of the delivery managers. And generally, they'll have a local team working with them on the sub-program. So there'll be a planner and maybe a cost engineer, help manage the schedule and the cost on the sub-program. But just one sub-program or project doesn't give you the whole picture about the program. So Ingrid really does rely on Helen and Devinder and Faisal to pull everything together. And here's another very important person, Grant. Grant's been around for ages. His hair is even grayer than mine. And if I put my glasses on and I grew a moustache and a beard, maybe I look a bit like Grant. But the issue with Grant is Grant doesn't really work for the controls team. Normally in organizations, your estimator often reports to the commercial director. And Grant often has to produce an estimate before there's even a completely defined scope, let alone a work breakdown structure. And without any schedule, Grant really can't estimate the effect of indexation. So Grant's important, but relationships with Grant to manage are really important and often tricky. And here's where we need Helen, the project controls manager. She's one of the integrators. She's careful about people, she understands people, she understands the importance of process, and she's up with the latest technology. And she's actually clocked there's an issue between the commercial directorate and the controls directorate. So she actually wants Devinder, and it's not Ed, it's Grant, and Grant to work closely together. Now, Devinder, the planner, has experience of cost loading schedules before, and actually he really doesn't want to do it because he knows it's a pain in the neck and it's a lot of work, and then you get multiple versions of the truth and cost isn't his bag. But hey, you know, Helen, the controls manager, knows that Faisal, the reporting manager, can really help there. So there's your team, there's your organisation that is set up to respond to those needs. Andrew, the CEO there, Janet nitpicking at the side, controls director, you've got the project controls manager, you've got some delivery managers, you've got Grant, the estimator, cost manager, scheduler, risk manager, reporting manager, and all sorts of variations on that, but typically those are key posts that you need. And you need to consider that before you even start managing change. But there's Charles. Charles is thinking, well, I've got quite a job to manage all these people. How do I get them all on the same page? I need some sort of strategy for managing change here, something that all of these people have bought into. But fortunately for Charles, his program management office have established some guidelines for managing change. Not to the nth degree, but enough so that there is a common approach, and enough so that the program can tailor those guidelines to actually produce work instructions on the program. So here's the sort of strategy typically that you have. I'm going to introduce some concepts here that you may well have heard. So typically we'll talk about the idea of a sanction on the estimate. This is an upper limit of funding that's approved. I'm going to explore with you some different types of funds that we have. Some of those might be within the sanction, some of them might be without. And also there's this idea of delegation of authority as well. Not everybody can approve every change. So what sort of level of change can people approve? But for the starting point is that change control on a capital program is there to manage budgets and manage value for money, to know, or to help Andrew know that he is going to be able to deliver his benefits. And before he's actually going to approve any expenditure, and this is the case with most clients, they're going to need some sort of sanction from the executive board. And normally there is a process in large organisations for boards to meet and say, yes, these are all the programs that are coming up. This one is coming for an investment decision this month. Here's what it needs to spend over all the years. How does that fit in with all the other programs in the organisation? Da 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 da. So that executive board will normally have to give approval for a sanctioned budget for a given scope. And that budget normally contains a number of different types of funds. So typically you'll have funds for program management. That's the team that is set out around the duration of the program to manage everything. There's some direct costs maybe for design and delivery for different elements of the program, different sub-projects. There'll be some risk. Emma's looked at our risk. Given that scope may not be mature, there's almost certainly some estimating uncertainty, and there are Treasury guidelines, by the way, for how you can cope with that in terms of percentage uplifts for different elements of scope. And if we're talking about a long-scale investment, there'll be some sort of allowance for indexation as well. And the organisation, of course, needs to consider all of that, but it doesn't necessarily give the programme the authority to spend all the money it's asking for in that total. So normally, the programme will have set up a full performance measurement baseline, and in that, yes, the program management costs will be included, the direct costs will be included. The risk will be available to the program normally to draw down if a risk event happens, but it's not normally in the performance measurement baseline. We use change control to make it available. But normally things like estimating uncertainty and indexation, and you'll maybe hear different terms for those in different organisations, but normally those are only available for the program director to draw down if he or she goes back to the executive board to get more authority. So the executive board will hold estimating uncertainty and indexation normally. So that gives rise to this delegation of authority, where the executive board have issued funds to the program to disburse and control. However, if certain changes may take the estimated final cost over that sanctioned budget or may delay benefits, maybe the program director has to go back to the executive board for further authorization. If the project manager is letting contracts, and as long as those contracts are coming in within their budget for their part of the program, no problem. But it might be that there is some change that is raised there, or a risk event happens, and they need to approach the program director through change control to get some more funds from the risk budget. So you can see that there are a number of potential levels of approval here for different changes. Maybe the project managers can approve it, maybe it has to be the program director, or normally the program director will have a program board that meets regularly, maybe every 4 weeks. Or is it the executive board? And let's not forget contractors in here as well. There's, of course, their own change process, further down the line in the supply chain. So how does that look graphically? Well, if we look at our estimated final cost on the left-hand side there, with the orange line across the top, that's, if you like, what the whole organisation thinks the programme might cost. The yellow bit is the allowance for indexation and uncertainty. That's held by the executive board. The blue bit is risk. That is held by the programme, but it isn't in the time-phased performance measurement baseline normally. The red bit on the left-hand side represents our time-phased performance measurement baseline. And on the right-hand side, we can see a number of coloured stacks here, each of which is a project. We've got Ingrid there managing the orange project. So you kind of get a feeling for how that works together. So clearly, before you do any change, you have a baseline to control away from, the baseline consisting of your time-phased expenditure. So Charles is onto a winner. People understand that because the program management, the PMO, has set that out, and he's started to detail some processes in conjunction with the rest of the organisation to deliver that. But you now need some sort of control and a change process. And to be honest, you can detail this to the nth degree. I've seen flowcharts, I've seen matrices, but the bottom line is, if there's a change, you need to identify and log the change. You need to evaluate the change for scope, cost, and schedule effect. You need to identify the level of approvals needed. You've either got to approve, reject, or recycle the change to some other part in the process. And if the change is approved, you've actually got to implement the change to the baseline and then deliver the work. So actually, in its essence, the change control process is really simple. Normally on a program, you'll find that amplified out to various levels of detail, so those boxes start to be replaced by flowcharts. So, for example, you might have a change within one project that maybe that change in one project doesn't affect the program estimated final cost, so the project manager can approve that. Maybe you have a change that does affect more than one project, or it affects the estimated final cost for the program, but it's within the sanction, minus the uncertainty, or the risk drawdown. Program manager has to approve that. Or maybe the change actually takes the estimated final cost outside the sanction, or you need to bring in some uncertainty, or you've got a delay to your benefits. That would normally have to be approved by the executive board. And you can also use this change process, by the way, when you've got integration in schedule between multiple sub-projects. Normally you'd use interface milestones, and you might have float on the interface milestones. So a give project might be negotiating with a get project manager to say, look, can you accept a revision to this baseline? And if the answer is yes, that's fine. If the answer is no, there's some sort of change control process that goes through to affect multiple projects. So let's have a look at some scenarios. So here's the scenario that Andrew's faced with. He needs to reduce expenditure over the next 3 years, but because his bonus depends on it, he wants to maintain benefit delivery dates at 6 years in the future. So the engineering team have done a great job. They've identified 3 opportunities for value engineering so they can actually deliver the same benefits or similar benefits, but with slightly different scope. The scheduling team and the controls team have had a good look round, and they can see that using some of the float in the program, potentially some activities can be deferred outside this critical 3-year window to reduce the cost of the first 3 years. But deferring those activities to later is going to increase indexation and therefore the estimated final cost. So there's a trade-off there. And those deferrals, if just considered by themselves, would delay the benefits. However, the delivery team have done the job, and they've identified a different implementation strategy in years 4 to 6. It's more expensive, and it's a bit more risky perhaps, so there's some risks to evaluate, but it does bring the delivery date for the benefits back onto Andrew's wishes. And that's typical. And it won't just be one program in an organisation that's doing that. It'll be multiple programs in a cycle every year, planning, funding. So an awful lot of our profession guys is actually based on making sure programs get funding before they even get to the control stage, live. So, what does Charles do? Charles logs those as 5 separate changes. So he's got the 3 opportunities, the deferral, and the implementation strategy. There are 5 opportunities because Janet doesn't know yet how much the program has to save. She's thinking about all of this in conjunction with other programs. And all of those programs are doing the exercises. But actually, if she could, she'd keep the current delivery strategy because any change to any of these profiles might need a reevaluation of the business case. She doesn't have that option. She has to do something. So, schedule impact analysis. First of all, let's assume here that the value engineering opportunities don't actually change activity timings. They only change cost. So that's Grant's job. Grant's re-estimating those. But Devinder, our planner, he's going to produce some what-if schedules. Or maybe if you use Primavera P6, some reflections. Come and talk to us on the stand if you want to know about reflections. And he's going to do that for the deferral of the activities. He's going to do that for the revised implementation strategy. And he's going to find he's going to have to go to and fro with the delivery teams for quite a while probably, until he's got a solution that delivers those benefits on time. So he finds what typically you find on a program, some activities are no longer needed. So he retires those. He doesn't delete the activities, he just retires those to the backs of the program. He's got to make sure that each of those activities have some sort of weighting for input into the cost control system, typically. So some of those activities might be weighted. Maybe you've got to transfer weights from old activities onto new activities. So there's quite a job there. And here's where Faisal gets involved. So Devinder gives the schedule output to Faisal and says, right, mate, your job now. I'd like you to help me integrate that with cost. Cost impact analysis. Grant's produced a revision of the estimate. Fantastic. So he's actually got each value engineering change cross-referenced to maybe a bill of quantities or an estimate schedule. And what he's done, for every omission, he's produced a new line with a negative quantity. And for every addition, he's produced a new line with a positive quantity. He's not gone back to the base file and changed quantities. He's tracking these individually as lines. Because that means, for each of those changes, he can come up with a different cost. He wouldn't be able to track the changes any other way. So we'll assume that the change for the revised implementation strategy perhaps contains, let's say, across-the-board add on implementation resources, and maybe some more temporary materials. And because Grant can estimate each item in the estimate to a change, both add and omit, he's got a revised final cost for base cost. But he can't do anything about indexation. He has no idea, really, about the timing of each of those estimate items. And that's where he's got to then pass his cost, perhaps, to Faisal for integration. So you can start to see the benefits now of potentially doing all of this in an integrated system. Yeah, we don't always do it, but if you've got an integrated system, people can be working on one database at one time. However, unfortunately, the breakdown of Grant's estimate doesn't match the breakdown of the activities in the schedule. It's a very, very common issue. So this is the sort of thing you can do. It's just a suggestion for integration. Imagine that Grant has got 4 items in his work breakdown structure. He's coded his estimate up to the work breakdown structure, so although it's not the same structure, he can cross-code it. 3 items there totaling 100 grand. Devinder in his schedule, maybe for the same work breakdown structure element, has got 4 activities, say, with a total activity day total of 100 days. So 100 grand, 100 days, £1,000 a day, gives you a rough costing for the activities. Now, that can work, and there are lots of systems around there that will help you do that automatically, but some caveats, okay? You've got to have a pretty reasonably uniform rate of expenditure profile across that work breakdown structure, so don't mix design and construction, for example. And this is fine if you don't want to just track the time-phased effect of each change, just the aggregate, that's all you need to do. But if you want to track the time-phased effect and you need to look at indexation, you've actually got to take the cost of each of those 4 activities, and generally then you've got to split it into periods, because indices get applied to periods. Normally yearly periods, so maybe people think inflation is going to be 3% next year, another 3% the year after that, 2.7%, so on, so on. So again, there are systems that help with that, and some of them can calculate indexation automatically. Not all of them can report on them automatically. Come and chat to us if you've got any issues about that. We'll happily talk to you. But by hook or by crook, Faisal can evaluate the weighting for each activity and the indexation for each WBS element, and he's integrated it all into the cost management solution. So he's effectively got a time-phased effect for each change. And this is what that looks like. Excuse me, what's happened there? There we go. So in this example, what we've done, we've actually change controlled into the program a risk event. So as we get halfway across the page, you can see actually the difference between the top of the risk and the bottom of the uncertainty has got less. We've taken risk out of the risk pot and controlled it into the performance measurement baseline, which is that dotted red line. That's typically how change control will work. But what could possibly go wrong? Well, there's at least 5 gotchas. I mean, I've spent the last year doing a lot of this on a major program, and there are lots of gotchas. First one, managing the stakeholders. So, first of all, any change that you're processing, make sure there's a timetable for actually dealing with it, so that people know what they've got to provide when. It's no good just saying to the scheduler, give me a cost impact analysis. They might take forever to do it. If you've got a program change board, don't bring anything to the change board for approval that's incomplete, because it's going to get knocked back. Keep an up-to-date change log. Make sure that comes to change board, and make sure anybody who's involved in approving that change have given you the thumbs up informally first. Do all the networking outside your change board, because if you don't, someone will sabotage you. And remember also that after the change is approved, it's still got to be implemented. So some stakeholders might well look to get implementation actions into approval actions and just delay change. Just be considerate about what you actually can do after the change is approved. But make sure you're really prompt and efficient with your implementation actions. So as soon as the changes are approved, make sure by the next board they're implemented. And again, the specialist systems that help you with a lot of that. A lot of the vendors are here today, so a lot of them will have workflow. A lot of them will put around information about the cost of the change and the time of the change. You can use them to help. Second gotcha. Change that isn't actually a change. So you'll find delivery managers love this one, because if they can get a change that isn't a change through, they're on schedule, they're on budget. So a change actually is an identifiable difference between a set of configured items, like benefit dates, like estimate versions, like requirement versions, and it normally affects baseline documents. Well, it always affects baseline documents. It probably also does affect final cost and phasing, but not necessarily the other way around, okay? Just because you've got a change that is an increase in a cost forecast, if there's not a corresponding scope change, it's not a change. Right, it's a cost variance. Don't change the baseline. It's a cost variance. If you've got a change that alters schedule dates, so in other words, you're doing a schedule update, you've got some productivity issues, things haven't quite panned out as planned. Oh, we've got some delay here. That's not a change. It's schedule variance, right? Don't change the baseline for that. It's a variance. Manage the variance. So moral, changes which are just forecast revisions aren't necessarily changes, and you'll find delivery managers love that, and they'll make your change manager's life a misery unless you knock them back. Third gotcha. Territory and structure disputes between finance, commercial and controls. We talked a little bit about that when I was talking about Grant, the estimator, because often if the estimator reports to a different function from controls, you can get real disparities between how they work, the timing of things, the structure of data, the granularity of the data. It can be very difficult. So what's really, really important is that you do have that work breakdown structure as the governing structure for estimate and schedule. Very, very important. And any program that embarks on any baseline without that is asking for trouble. What you can do is you can map estimate costs to each WBS element, and you can map schedule activities to each WBS element and give them a weighting. So they don't have to be identical at the lower level, but they really need to be able to be cross-coded to the same WBS structure. And then again, remember that finance colleagues may have their own data requirements for reporting into SAP or whatever your finance system is. Whatever you do as controls and change, though, make sure there's one source of truth. And my preference is to make sure that the cost management solution feeds the finance system, that you don't have little skunk works Excel spreadsheets all over the place with delivery managers saying, here's my forecast. If it goes, you've got one source of truth. So that's my opinion. Forecast from the cost management solution should feed the financial system. Make sure all the stakeholders are satisfied with the level of data that they've got as well. And again, integrated systems can really help that. I tell you what, if I'd had a system that actually joins my estimate, my change control, and my schedule all in one database, it's really going to help territorial disputes. It's a nightmare stitching it together. Not just even from Excel, but from different systems. It can be really difficult. Not impossible, but challenging. Here's the other gotcha. Change on change on change on change. And you've got lots of these changes in flight, but no approvals. Brief example, because we're nearly finished. Let's suppose change number 100 affects 3 scope items, okay? And let's look at item C. Item C is 100 cubic meters of concrete, and there's going to be a change that is going to give you another 10 cubic meters of concrete at £100 a cube. So £100 a cube, 10 cubic meters, £1,000. Change 101. And let's say that also affects scope item C, amongst other things. Scope item C, the concrete's changed from grade 30 to grade 40, £5 a cubic meter. But how many cubic meters? Change 102. Affects same scope item. C's there again, but this time we've got a different finish, £2 a cubic meter. Now, ultimately, all of this comes out in the wash, but somebody's got to approve or reject these changes, right? You've got 3 changes there. The amount of cost attributable to each change actually depends on the order they're approved. And Janet's really picky, so she'll pick up on that. But you know, for evaluation purposes about whether the change is approved or rejected, how are you going to attribute the cost to each change? Answer 1, just evaluate from a fixed control budget. So change 100 is £1,000. Change 101 is £5 from the original 100 cubic meters, £500. Change 102 is £2 from the original 100 cubic meters, £200. That's an answer. Another answer would be to evaluate them in the order they're raised, which won't necessarily be the order they're approved, because they might not all get approved, but actually you can get a different sum of money. You see what I mean? And actually you've got another way of doing it, which is to actually think of all the possibilities about the order of approval and evaluate it all. There's 6 ways. It's just ridiculous. My preference is to just take it as evaluating it on a fixed control budget for the purposes of approval, and then if you need to do an audit trail, just actually work out what the cost attributable to that one change was and backfit it into your change log. Somebody in finance will ask for it, I can guarantee you. And this is the last gotcha. Finance often want to see the time-phased effect of every change or potential change, including indexation, and this can be a lot of work, So all I'd say here is, unless you're going to approve change promptly, or you've got a solution that integrates all of those things, just be prepared for a lot of heartache. And this is really where systems and process and that organisation, that controls organisation, will pay dividends. So I'd say if you really need that, use a specialist solution or be prepared for a lot of stress. So, recap. Remember no score, needs. Andrew, he's got regulatory requirements, he's got shareholders, he needs investment decisions, and these change often. He's got an organisation to set up to deliver his programs. They're delivered by people in a structure or an operating model. Within those programs, there's a strategy for dealing with change. That's normally involves some sort of delegation of authority. Before you approve any change, you've got to evaluate it for its impact, but really try to use a simple impact evaluation process. Keep it simple as much as you can. Use the change control process to manage budget in from the risk and opportunities budget into the performance measurement baseline. You won't regret it, because at the end of the job, you'll actually have an opportunity to determine which risks materialised, and that can be really useful for learning for future. And your gotchas. Just watch out for managing the stakeholders, get them all online before the change board. Beat back change that isn't change, otherwise you'll make your own life a nightmare. Watch out for territory disputes between commercial and controls, and try and get that working relationship set up right at the beginning. Watch out for change on change on change. Keep things approved as you go. And if you really, really have to track the time-phased effect attributable to each change, not just the aggregate, make sure you've got a specialist system, specialist help, and you talk to people who've done it before. So just final takeaway, conclusion. Match your organisation and your process and your systems to meet your CEO's needs, and integrate your risk and opportunity management for that, for a holistic change process that's going to deliver properly for your organisation. I'm out of time, which is great because I can't have any questions here. Please come and see me on the stand 17 at break, or for the rest of the day I'll be there till 5:30, 6 o'clock. Have a chat over a coffee and a beer. Thank you.